Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the weekend. My name is Jackie Pecora, and I'm honored to introduce our celebrity spotlight guest. Today marks the halfway point of our month-long readathon fundraiser, and we hope you're getting involved. We're extremely proud to be able to provide these celebrity reader spotlights all month long, which includes some of the most amazing authors around. Hello. These events are brought to you by our sponsors, Marlarm Security, Investors Bank, Jovia Financial Credit Union, and Serini Associates Public Accountants. And we thank them for their investment in our mission and for allowing the Book Fairies to continue to put books in the hands of children and adults who have none. It's not too late to participate. You can click on the link in the fundraiser in our post and create a personal fundraising page. You can also join us at our next all-series trivia night on August 26th, or you could simply make a donation. The Book Fairies mission is large, and we can't do it without sponsors and donors like you. Today, we're in for a treat because our special guest is Stephanie Larkin, who's going to teach us how to write a book in her celebrity writing workshop. Stephanie Larkin is the founder and president of Red Penguin Books and Web Solutions, a book and web publication company for over a decade. She enjoys working with books of all genres and helping people to unleash their inner author through book coaching and development. Stephanie is the author of Write That Book and 365 Reasons to Celebrate and Score with Social Media. Stephanie enjoys speaking with groups such as professional organizations and chambers, artists, and authors on topics like small business strategies and leveraging the power of the pen. She teaches courses ranging from small business management to sales and advertising in the marketing department at Nassau Community College. She's the host of television's The Author Corner, airing on Verizon, Optimum, and QPTV, as well as Between the Covers, the show for readers, writers, and lovers of books. I am so excited about today's workshop. So without further ado, let's welcome Stephanie Larkin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I am so excited to be here because you got me talking about my favorite subject in the world, which is writing books. I read somewhere, I think it was Book Expo, that did a poll, and 90% of the people polled said that one of their bucket list items, what they want to do in their life, is to write a book. So I guess I'm speaking to the majority here, because probably if you're watching, you want to write.
All right, so I'm going to shut off and I'm going to let you do your thing, all right?
Bye, Jackie. I hope you're watching. Here in America, the number of people who actually get to the finish line and write their book is like, I don't know, 1%. You'd be better off if you lived in Iceland, by the way. In Iceland, about 40% of the adults write a book. So let's see if we can get America to win and write that book. So what I do is I work with people who want to write a book. And that's why I'm here today, is to talk to you about getting started writing that book. Because if you're in the 90% of people who want to write a book, you've come to the right place. Now, there's a lot of different types of books you can write, and there's a lot of different reasons that you might want to write a book. I'm standing in front of a stack of books that I've published, and I have more next to me because I wanted to talk first about the different types of books. Because if you said, yeah, I'd really like to write a book, it could have a lot of different reasons to you. You might want to write a children's book. You might want to write a thriller novel. You might want to write a personal memoir. And all of those are fabulous books for you to write. So I'm hoping that by the end of this, you're thinking, wow, I love the idea of that kind of a book. That's the one that's really touching my heart, because whichever one is touching your heart, that's the one that'll get written. And the ones that are not touching your heart, those are the ones that are going to end up in the drawer, like scraps of paper. But admittedly, I do have authors who have come to me with 200 pieces of loose leaf. They've been filling that drawer for years. And we take those 200 pieces of loose leaf, type them all up, and we end up publishing a book. That could be you too. So I'm really, really glad you're here for Write That Book. Let's get it done and let's get started. I always think that I'm a very goal-oriented person. I'm very much about why do we do things? Because to me, if you have a really good reason why, you'll get something done. And you might have tuned in and you're thinking, okay, that sounds lovely, but really, writing a whole book, I don't think I have the time. I don't think I have the skill. I just don't think I'm going to get to the end. So why even start? Well, as I said, if you have a really good why, then you'll get it done. Now, I'm a super busy person, and somehow I've managed, because I also ghostwrite, to ghostwrite like 5 books this year already. So if I can do that, you can do that. But when it comes to why, I always think about, do you ever hear about a car accident and someone's pinned under the car and the bystanders, 8 burly guys it takes to lift that car up? But if there's an accident and there's a child pinned under that car, it only takes one person to lift the car, mom. If mom or dad are there, that car is up, because they had a strong enough reason why. So I want to talk about why before we talk about how. If you know why you want to do something, the how is going to fall into place. So good reasons why you might want to write a book. Well, one really good reason is as a legacy project. I work on loads of legacy projects with people. A book that someone will write and then they can pass it down to their children and grandchildren, or just to validate their own life, or a really nice walk down memory lane, for example. I have a book here that we just published recently called Bronx Brat. This is a book that a gentleman came to me. He had been writing for years. He had some very poignant memories of his childhood and growing up during the war, and he really wanted to share it. And he wanted to share it not just with himself on paper. He wanted to be able to pass it down to his grandchildren so that they would really know who he was. But even bigger than that, now there's a whole generation of people who grew up in this time period who are reading the book saying, I remember that street. I remember that movie theater. And they're really enjoying it. So this is like a legacy book. It's a labor of love. But not only does the author of this book get to hold it in his hand, attend book signings, toast some champagne, because I know we're very celebratory about everything here, but it actually has given rise to a whole lot of other people who have those same shared memories. One of my favorite personal memoirs I've done recently, this one, it's called 1,000 Days in Northern Vermont. The person who wrote this book had gone to Vermont when he was a teenager. And while he was up there in Vermont, he lived kind of on a commune kind of a situation. And he had 3 years, I think from the time he was 18 to maybe 21, that he lived up in Vermont. Interesting memories if you think about the late 70s on a commune. But he had a really good time up there and he had fond memories of it. So he wrote this book. He went through the stories, he went through the pictures. Just the writing of the book was an adventure in itself. And then he took the adventure one step further and he drove up to Vermont. He drove up twice, once while he was doing research to retake some of the pictures, because it was a pretty crummy camera back in the 70s, and to maybe remember what things are like. But while he was there, he stopped by at a lot of shops and told the people, I'm coming out with a book all about this area. And they said, great, when it comes out, we'd love to have you here. Maybe to have a meeting, a meet and greet. We can sell books at the door. People can come who might have known you then. So if you grew up and you were a teenage hippie in the 70s in Vermont, this might be the book for you. But what a great time author Bob Vernouilly had. He's a Long Island native right here, except for that little stint in Vermont. And it's a memoir. It's a personal memoir reminding him of all those days. So personal legacy projects are a great reason to write a book. And if that's the type of book you would like to write, there's a few things I want to have you keep in mind. One thing, you don't need to start at the beginning and go all the way to the end. You don't need to say, oh my gosh, I can't even remember my address when I was 2. That's not necessarily important. Now, some people like books that start to the beginning to end. The book I showed you earlier is a little more of that type of book. It starts from the beginning. It actually only goes up until he's 18 years old. There was a lot before he was even 18. But you know what happened to that author? The author of this book is now writing book number 2. In fact, every author I work with, almost immediately after the book is published, they're on to writing book number 2. Writing books, it's like eating potato chips. You can't have just one. Now, on the flip side, where this is kind of chronological, and that author wanted to think about dates and events from specific times, the author of this book did not start from the beginning. I have no idea where he was born. I know it was on Long Island, but I have no idea the circumstances of anything that happened to him until he drove up in that car with a bunch of friends and went to Vermont. So this one is just a very, very specific time period. It's not from beginning to end, it's just a couple of years in the middle. So a memoir that you're writing could be of your whole thing. That's usually called a biography or an autobiography if you're writing it. A memoir is generally more selective. It's not the story of your life, it's the story from your life. One little section. It could be just a time period. It could be more thematic. Maybe you want to do a travel log just of the trips you've taken instead of doing your whole life. Or maybe you're writing a memoir about the story of your marriage. So you're actually not even going to bother mentioning all those extraneous things. We've done marriage stories for people, maybe in celebration of an anniversary or something. So there's lots of ways to write your personal story. So if you're thinking about writing a personal story, first I want you to think about that. Do you want to write it about a chronology of everything that kind of happened? Or do you want to pick a particular time period? Maybe your college years, or maybe the year you turned 30 was just so noteworthy for a million reasons. Maybe good, maybe bad. I'm guessing there's going to be a whole lot of 2020 books that are going to be coming out in the future because this has been quite the year. So that's definitely going to happen. So maybe you have a specific time period, or maybe you have a theme you would like to write about. Maybe it's your love of cooking or knitting or something. Or maybe it's every time you go to a particular beach and you have memories just on that beach. If that's what you'd like to do, the first thing you want to think about is, are we doing the big scope or the narrower one? And what I generally tell people when they're starting any type of book, the exercise that I use is generally the 20-day challenge. Listen to how this goes. Every single day, I want you to write something. You could use index cards, Post-its, whatever you want. And when you write it, what I want you to do is put it in a box. Don't look at it again. Put it in a box, a drawer, someplace without looking. Tomorrow, I want you to write something else. It could be something different. It could be the same. It really doesn't matter. Just write what you feel inside. You could write a sentence. You could write a paragraph. Who knows what you're going to write? And again, put it in the box. Don't look at things. At the end of 20 days, open the box. Now, when you open that box, you are probably going to find that of all these pieces of paper, many of them are very similar. They might have to do with certain themes or time periods. If you had to write something every single day, even if it was just some thoughts, you would start to see over time where your mind goes. The reason why I tell people to put it in a box is so that you don't see what you wrote yesterday. Here's the problem. If you had a giant legal pad and every day you wrote something new at the top, and then you added something the next day and the next day, eventually you're going to look at that legal pad and say, I already wrote that. I'm not going to write it again. If it's in a box, then you feel free to write it again. And I want you to write it again. Okay, because that's kind of the point. At the end, there should be 20 different things in the box, completely different. Sorry for the cough, just a lot of talking. So when you open the box, if you have 7 pieces of paper that are pretty close together, I think you know what your book is about. So that's the 20-day put it in a box challenge. I've had people who have done this on their computer or phone. Again, remember, you don't want to see what you wrote yesterday. So if you are going to do this on your phone, I know on my phone, I am like addicted to that notes function. I write myself notes for everything. If you're going to do it in notes, then maybe the top line, because remember the top line of everything appears. So the top line, maybe just put the date or note number 6 or something like that, and then skip a few lines before you start typing. Remember, I don't want you to see even one word of what you wrote before, because it will most definitely influence you. So that's a great way to get started on a personal project. Now, perhaps instead of writing a personal project that is authentic, like the actual facts, maybe you want to do a fictionalized version of your memories. Maybe your story is your grandparents' story and you don't actually know all the details. Well, that could be a fabulous story too. In fact, this book here, Runaway at Sea, Marguerite Maitland wrote this about her grandfather. Now, what she knows about him, grandfather, might be great-grandfather, somebody she never met. And what she does know, though, is that when he was 12 years old, he was living in England and he had a terrible older brother. I'm sure some of you can relate to the terrible older brother. Well, the terrible older brother was kind of so nasty that this 12-year-old boy ran away. He ran away with his best friend and they went down to the boat docks and they became stowaways. Well, the story doesn't end with the mean stowaways, because as soon as the boat pulled out, the next morning when they woke up, or were awoken as the case may be, they realized that they were actually on a British naval vessel. Well, I don't know about your Navy, but the British Navy does not take very well to stowaways. They made them work and work and work and work. Well, they sailed all over the world, working their little tails off, ended up finally in America, traveling across the country, all sorts of adventures. Now, this is a story that was passed down in her family. People would tell people who would tell people. But she certainly doesn't know what one person said to another person. She has no dialogue. She has absolutely no idea when this young 12-year-old boy arrived at this ship, you know, whether he went in the front exit entrance or the back entrance or scurried up the ropes. Nobody really knows that. So it does have an element of fiction in there. But she did a huge amount of research too, since she knew what year that ship left and the name, because it was kind of part of the family history. She went back through ship records. She even found out the name of the captain and all the other things. She's been writing this book for years, and what a journey. In fact, Marguerite told me that when she was working on this book, she ended up emailing a library in the original town in England. Well, I think librarians are next to God because they are so generous with their time and so unbelievably wise in knowledge. This librarian was thrilled to help, found all sorts of information, sent it over to America so she could include it in her book. So this book, which is only the first, it'll be 3 books because after the ship and the walking across America and starting a homestead, there was a lot. But remember, all of these books are coming out of a family history that maybe was 1 page long. I have another one. This is a fabulous book that even won some book awards, Becoming Herself by Maureen Reed. Maureen lives right here in Rockville Center. And she, like our last author, had an inkling about her grandmother. She never met her, but she had heard that she died tragically. She knew that she had come over from Ireland on a boat. She knew the year, and she knew that she died tragically in a fire. Pretty much that's what she knew. So she wrote a whole story. Well, oh my goodness, love this story. Absolutely love it. She really doesn't know her grandmother's best friend's name, but she's in the book. She really doesn't know a lot of things. She might know the children, of course, they're family members, but all of those particulars she didn't know. But going off the time period, knowing when she would have been living and where, she knew the name of the town, she pieced things together and wrote this fabulous, it is historical fiction. There's a lot that her creativity took over in this book, but what a book it is. And also, you know what she's doing now? She's writing another one. This author went upstate to the town where her grandmother lived and met with the librarians and bookstore owners there, did book signings, actually walked into the library and someone remembered her grandmother. What a fabulous adventure. So if you want to write a personal project, it could be about you, it could be about a family member. And if you don't have all the details to fill in, like some of these books I told you, you could fill them in yourself. So that's a great, great project to work on. So maybe the way to start your book is to think back. Do you have fabulous family stories? Do people talk about somebody who eloped maybe in the dark of night, or somebody who was, working on Wall Street the day of the crash in 29? Do you have someone who was in one of those places? Maybe you can't find out all the facts, but you can have them star in a book that you write. And again, what a gift. What a gift to you, your family, your readers, and what an adventure you can be on writing a book like that. Now, maybe you have a story in your head and it has nothing to do with your grandmother. Maybe you just, when you watch movies on TV, you think, I have a whole story going on in my head. It could be a mystery, it could be science fiction, could be crime drama, it could be anything. If you're one of those people that puts a whole story in your head as you're thinking, and you picture things and characters, and your characters keep you up at night, maybe you want to be a fiction writer. And fiction can be anything from, police crime drama to romance, anything in between. Fiction books are so much fun to write because you get to essentially make it up as you go along. So if you're one of those people who always has a ready story, maybe if you were someplace and they said, tell me a story, you can come up with one on the spot. Maybe you are primed to become a fiction writer. So whatever genre you like to read in, you might also want to write in. Now, if you're getting started with fiction, I'll tell you a little bit about what fiction writers do. Usually fiction writers are one of 2 types. Now, you don't have to pick one of these types, by the way. It's just that this is the way things usually fall. Fiction writers could be planners. Planners are people who they think about the whole story sequentially. They know who the protagonist or the star of the story is going to be. They figure out who the bad guy is going to be. They know what the end is going to be. They may plot things out with a big chart. I'm a planner, by the way. I love whiteboards and colored Post-its and all of those things that go along with planning. So a planner likes to figure out all of those pieces before even starting. And if you're a planner, fantastic. You can even plan down to all of your characters and writing an index card with every character's personal traits. You know, before you have a character walk into your story, you want to know, are they a nice person, sweet, angry, carry a chip on their shoulder? Are they sarcastic? Are they so tall they have to duck through doorways, or so short that they have to sit on a pillow? Make your characters come alive. Think about each character in your story and think about all the different qualities of that character. You want to think about what they look like, what they sound like. Is their voice gruff or loud, or do they speak with a little tiny whisper of a voice? What are they like personality-wise? And think a little bit about their backstory. Even if you never mention a backstory. A backstory is something that actors do too. If an actor has to play a role, and the role is of a 30-year-old, even if there are no flashbacks in that movie, that actor is going to think in their head beforehand, what was that 30-year-old's childhood like? Because it could make a big difference to how they perform it. If you're thinking about a person who, you know, was had a traumatic childhood with terrible things happen, you know that that might have an effect later on. Or if a person had a childhood, as we say, they grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth, that's definitely going to affect them. Later on, if they're struggling with things, they're going to have a very different attitude than someone else. So if you're writing fiction, pure fiction, you get to make it up at everything, and you're a planner, you want to plan the overall structure from beginning to end. You'll want to plan your characters and make different character outlines for each one. Maybe think about them in terms of who you would want to play them in the movie. That might do it. If you're thinking about a female character, is she a tough, like a Sigourney Weaver type, or is she more of a soft, like romance type? Okay, think about who you want to play the character in the movie, and that might help you to decide what that character looks like, sounds like, what their past has been like, what their attitudes are like, how they deal with life. Now, the other kind of fiction writer, and again, you don't have to pick one, is what they call a pantser. A pantser means someone who kind of flies by the seat of their pants. A pantser, when they're a writer, literally sits down at the computer or paper and pen, and they don't really know what's going to happen next. They're just typing, and their characters can take on a life of their own. I have to admit, I am incredibly jealous of fiction writers who are pantsers. I have always wanted to be a pantser myself. They tell me that they could be sitting there at their computer, and all of a sudden they're aghast, and they say, "Oh, I can't believe that character just died." And I think, you killed him. What do you mean you can't believe he just died? You killed him. Or they'll say, "Oh, I can't believe she said that." Aren't you the one typing? But for a true pantser, they can be completely surprised. Now, many times people are a little bit of both. They may have a general idea of what this story is going to go and some characters, but then as they get going, things just happen. I mean, kind of like life, right? We can plan things and then things just happen. I mean, look at 2020, for example. Sometimes things just happen. So you don't have to be just a planner, and you don't have to be just a pantser. You can plan a little and then try sitting down at the computer and just let it flow. So even those pantsers, though, may look, of course, at a scene and say, let me look at this as a craft. The whole thing can't be just stream of consciousness. We do have to make sure we tie up loose ends. And someone who might just kind of fly by the seat of their pants, when they get to the end, they are most certainly going to go back and make sure that if it was a mystery, for example, that there were clues. They might make sure, here's the clue that somebody missed. They're going to check on things like, let's make sure that a character didn't get suddenly introduced here and nobody knew about it. Maybe we'll have them introduced a little sooner, just to be sure. But if you are a natural storyteller, if thinking about stories really, really makes you happy, and you'd much rather think about stories than even watch stories, you might be ready to be a fiction writer. Now, another kind of book you might want to write, and I work on a lot of people with this kind of book, is a book that helps your business. Now, if you happen to run a business, or maybe you're a teacher or some other professional, a book might be a huge, huge help to you. For example, this is a book. You are the CEO of your career, Mastering the Job Search in 10 Easy Steps. Now, Mindy Stern, who wrote this book, is a career coach. She works with people on figuring out what they want to do next in life. She worked as a consultant. She also goes into big corporations, and sometimes she'll work with like all of their interns. Or if they're downsizing and they need job training for the next thing, that's what she does. She runs a whole company about that. Well, she wrote this book, and if you can see in this book, it's actually a workbook, okay? There are lots of places and checklists and things for people to fill out as they go along. She uses this book in what she's doing. So when she sits down with someone to work on what they want to do next in life, or interview techniques, or writing a resume, she wrote a book all about it. So when she gets a new client, she can use her own book as the workbook. She also uses these books when a big corporation calls her and says, please give a workshop for 400 people. They all get a book, okay? So that kind of book is really affirming to her in her business, and it's helped her business tremendously because people can see this book and they work on it with her. And now if she's doing Zoom calls instead of live calls, she can simply say, let's all turn to page 36. So this is a great book for professionals to work on. If you're a teacher, maybe what you're teaching doesn't really align with any other book. Maybe you're finding that, you don't really work with this one or that one, and you find you have to ask your class to have 6 different books. That could happen. And many, many schools, universities and such, write their own textbooks. That's a thing, that people are writing their own books because it's designed to meet exactly what they need. Well, this is a book we just released. You might recognize the name. It's actually my husband who wrote it. Messengers of God is a survey of Old Testament prophets. Well, my husband happens to teach Bible courses, and there was no one book that hit exactly what he wanted it to hit. So he wrote it. He's coming out with a new one this year, which is all about the women prophets of the Old Testament. Now, there's a book nobody had because he wanted to teach it. So all of his students have it. He can give workshops. He can give talks about a subject that really had no book. Another way you can use a book in business, I'll use this one, From Crisis to Calm, written by a patient care advocate. She uses this book in her business also because she found herself saying the same thing over and over to people. Every time she had somebody she was working with, a patient advocate is someone who helps people to navigate things like health insurance and all those other things you might have with a long-term illness or aging. That's so complicated. And she found herself saying the same things over and over and over. And then people would forget. And they'd call and say, "What did you say about Medicare? I can't remember." So she wrote it down. And this way she can hand this to people and just simply say, "Here, have a free book." Gosh, it means I don't have to keep talking about this thing over and over and over. So those are some professional reasons you might want to write a book. If you're a professional or somebody who owns a business, another thing that a book does is it builds you instant credibility. Now that's huge nowadays. I don't know how many of you out there are professionals or business owners, but considering what just happened in this world, we all had to, in many ways, pivot. We've had unemployment rates through the roof. So you might have to kind of make a whole new reality for yourself. And honestly, there is no better way to build your credibility in a field than to write a book. I mentioned this book here. Well, ever since Nicole Christensen wrote this book, now all of a sudden hospitals are calling her. They want her to come in and hold workshops and do speaking engagements. So now that's definitely helped her income. Because if you would like to be a professional speaker, running workshops, or maybe just raise your rates, whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or a healthcare advocate, having a book means that you can even charge more in your business. Maybe your business was kind of over here before the pandemic and you kind of have to put it here. Well, how do you get people who know and trust you over here to know that you're trustworthy over here? Many times it's through a book. So whether you are an event planner or, some other professional that needs to get the word out that you're the expert, nothing builds credibility quite like a book. And speaking about building credibility, I have a very interesting book next to me that I talk a lot to people about building credibility through books. But I never thought about it for students until my own daughter came to me. Now, my daughter was in college and she was applying to grad school. And of course, like anybody who's applying, you're trying to make yourself look really, really good on the page, aren't you? That's a thing. That's why people in college do all those unpaid internships just to have one more bullet point on that application so that their resume stands out from everybody else. So going back, my daughter was in college and she wanted to apply to grad school. And if she, of course, stars in her eyes, I love it, wanted to apply only to the best grad schools. That's it. She gave me a list of like 5. I gasped. But she said she had her eyes set on that, and that's what she wanted. So she came to me and said, "Do you think that if I was a published author, that would help?" I said, "Well, goodness, I'm constantly telling people who write all these other professional books that it's going to help their career. Why not try?" So she had, of course, when you're in college, lots and lots of papers, long papers, some of them hundreds of pages long. So she came to me with 2 of them, 2 of her longest ones. And one of them she crafted into this book. She was a political science major, all about politics. And this one she crafted into a book about our Native Americans. They grew out of giant research projects she had done. So we published them and we put them on her application. And I am so proud to say that she is now graduating with her master's from the London School of Economics, one of the top 10 schools in the entire world. Now, I'm not going to tell you specifically that the book got her into the school, but it certainly didn't hurt, that's for sure. It certainly was a big, big help. So just like any bullet point that you are putting on something on a resume, it definitely, definitely helps. Not to mention, it's so much fun for her when she looks, and I could tell her on Amazon that, look at that, someone just bought your book in Italy. They're fascinated. Maybe someone's using your book in their research project. Maybe they're using it to get to their next place. So that's a load of reasons why you might want to write a book. You might want to write it as a personal legacy project. You might want to write it just for creative fulfillment. Or you might want to write it to get a step ahead, to get a leg up into that next place. That's why. And if you have a good why, that book will get written. But if we're going through the 5 W's and that was the why, the next question you're probably asking yourself is, when? When am I going to have time to write this book? And as I said, I have so many authors who are finding the time to write these books. I mean, goodness, studies say that people spend over an hour a day on Facebook. Well, I'm thrilled you're spending this hour a day on Facebook with me, but if people are spending that much time on Facebook, think of how many books they could be writing in that time. When usually is best if you set aside a certain amount of time, whether it's daily or weekly. I've had authors who take themselves on a writer's retreat. They'll go away for a week so that they can get a leg up on their book. And the when that works for you, if you're a middle of the night person, well, then write your book in the middle of the night. But the point is to prioritize it and make sure that if there are other people you live with, that they know you're writing a book. That means something, and that's a priority to you. That might go right into, where are you writing this book? Because if you can put a dedicated space, make it look nice, whatever you need. If you like plants, if you need good lighting, if you want some soft music. I knew somebody that for some reason, they had a TV and it was always playing the National Geographic Channel. They were a fiction writer. They were not writing about animals at all. But for some reason, that inspired them to have on nature shows. So whatever it is that inspires you, wherever it is, set yourself up. Maybe you like typing. Maybe you like dictating. Nowadays, you can dictate an entire book into a phone. Whatever works for you is the best when and where. So we had why, and that also led us to a who. Who are you writing for? Are you writing for your family, for your legacy, for your future college, for your business, for yourself? Who are you writing this book for? When are you going to make the time to write it? Where are you going to set up? And then I know you're asking, but how? And I think my favorite quote of all times is a Walt Disney quote. And the quote is, keep moving forward. To me, how is just a matter of one step in front of the other. Or as Nike says, just do it. You might sit there and say, I don't have the skills, the tools, the time, the inclination. Well, just get started. If you are a rock rolling downhill, it is so much easier to fix and pivot. Another how I always tell my future writers is, don't edit as you write. Nothing will squash your creativity faster than sitting there trying to figure out whether or not you split an infinitive or not. Just keep writing. It goes writing first, editing second. Keep writing. It's easier to fix things or even to cut things out later on. But if you kind of throw a wet blanket over your writing right now and stop it in its tracks, that's never good. So if you want to write, write. Get started. Get started today and write something. You don't have to write a whole chapter. You don't have to write a whole book proposal. Just write something. And then tomorrow, maybe write a little bit more. But the best way to write a book is from the beginning and keep going. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't write out of sequence. Quite frankly, I know a lot of people who write out of sequence. If you're totally inspired by this section over here, that doesn't mean you have to start at the beginning. Even if it was a biography, you don't have to start at the beginning and keep going all the way to the end. Just write something. Now, I would love it if any of you have any questions to ask. I see our first question here, and it's a good one. How many times do you rewrite and edit a book? Well, somewhere between 2 and 200. How's that for an answer? Some people, you know, are rewriting that book forever. And that I don't want either. I want us to get them out there. You could sit on projects for too long. But certainly, eyes on your book is a good thing, but not while you're still in the writing stage, okay? In my own office, we honestly edit everything 3 times. And I'm a firm believer in editing on paper. Like, we actually print things. I know that's not good for the environment, and I apologize. But, you know, editing on screen, your eyes play tricks on you. I like editing on paper. So in answer to how many times, you know, at least 2. Let's do less than 200 because we want to get that out. My next question was, how do I coach writers? Well, that's an excellent, excellent question. And when I coach writers, I think that I kind of fall somewhere in the middle of being an organizer and being a cheerleader, you know, because sometimes, and I'm a nag too. I'm the one who says, excuse me, did you write something today? When I coach writers, generally we start by having a big planning meeting. I love doing those in person. I miss those. So if we have to do it on Zoom, we do, but usually for an hour or 2, and thinking and talking. And I will have them do the 20-day project first so we know what they're thinking about. And we make a giant outline. And when I'm working with someone on that outline, I use Google Drive. I don't know if any of you are big proponents of Google Drive, but I live for it. And what's one great thing about Google Drive is that 2 people can share a file, and one person writes on it, and the other person can leave like Post-it notes. So I read through what my writers are writing, and I can encourage them. We usually have, you know, check-in phone calls weekly and lunches and things like that. But in the meantime, checking in on their documents is a great way to keep them moving forward. So I said, many times I'm just the push, the nag, and other times I'm making suggestions. So my role kind of changes. I have a question here about getting over writer's block, especially when you're in the middle of a book. Do you have test readers or friends read a book? And how do you know when to get other people's opinions or follow your gut? Okay, well, those are 2 great questions. Let's talk about writer's block, especially in the middle. You know, there's a million things you could read about tips and tricks to get over writer's block. But if you're already in the middle of a book, I think a great thing to do to get over writer's block is either research, like whatever you're thinking about, or better yet, do something. Do something that happens in your book. If you're stuck at this one pinnacle scene, I know Marguerite, who wrote this book, talks about the fact that in order to really learn what it was like, those boys were out there on a rowboat. So you know what she did? She learned how to row. She went out rowing, doing something that's in your book, or being one of the characters, maybe going out one night and taking on one of your character's roles. Please don't do anything dangerous or illegal, but sometimes being in your book gives you that spark to get over writer's block. And it might also introduce where things go next. Maybe you're stuck because you're not really sure what comes next. That could help. Another thing that could help is if you're stuck on writer's block right here, skip this part. You know, we're stuck right here. So let's skip it. Let's come over here instead, because maybe this part you have clarity about. And you can always come back to this. But sometimes we get stuck. We think we have to deal with this problem. But you know what? A book is like, you know what, 200 pages long. There are plenty of other things to work on. So if you're stuck on writer's block in the middle, maybe write the ending. Maybe write something else. I love this question about how to know when to listen to other people's opinion or to follow your gut. I think that's an excellent question. And certainly I'll say 2 things to that one. Maybe I'll say 3. When it comes to other people's opinions, I think that you should not trust one person's opinion. I think you should get more than one, because then you'll kind of see a group. I think I don't like when people are swayed by one. Oh, my friend said I should do this. Oh, but then I had another friend that said I should do this. I think you should gather a couple of opinions. I will give an exception though. If you are talking about someone whose opinion you truly value for professional reasons, if you actually sent your book to a friend who is an English teacher or a librarian or a writer themselves, I think that opinion certainly goes above, mom, with all due respect to mom. But I am a firm believer in ownership of your own words. So your gut really matters to me. Do I agree with everything that authors I work with write? No, no. Sometimes we had one thing going back and forth between an author that we're publishing soon and myself about capitalization of a word. Yes, we actually have conversations in this office about things like capitalization and about the Oxford comma and uses of, quotation marks versus italic, because people have different opinions. And believe me, if we can have different opinions about a capitalization of a word, we can have it about character development. And I will always offer my opinion, which I think is a good professional opinion. But my attitude with an author is always, it's your book. Your name is going at the bottom. I mean, yes, I'm the publisher and I love publishing books. Believe me, I adore that all of our books have our company logo on it because I am so incredibly proud of every single book that I publish. This is really making me happy. But your name is on the cover. So if you have a difference of opinion with someone, listen, take it into account, mull it over, but honestly, it's your gut that matters. And someone I see asked about developmental editing. Just to kind of describe the difference, there's copy editing and developmental editing. Copy editing means things like fixing spelling and grammar and punctuation so that the manuscript is perfect. Developmental editing is a deeper editing. That has to do with, I didn't find your character likable, or I thought that scene kind of came out of nowhere. Okay, that's editing on a core level. And certainly, I hate to talk money, but you could see how somebody who's working with you on a developmental level is working with you over a longer period of time to get to the core level of that book. We certainly do both in our company, but just to let you know of the difference, like we definitely want to make sure that your book is copy edited. Every single book should be clean. You would never want to have, misspellings in your book or things like that. Not everybody really wants their book to be developmentally edited, because sometimes people write a book and they want it to be just what they want it to be. We do handle both here, but as I said, the copy edit is the one that we make sure that every book has. Developmental editing is a choice. I love this. Someone asked, what is my favorite genre to read and write? Well, I always say, I write boring nonfiction because I do ghostwrite for people. Our company ghostwrites for people, and the part that I do is generally boring nonfiction. By that, I mean corporate manuals, technical things, educational materials. That's the kind of stuff that I guess hits my strengths. What do I wish I was writing? Well, one day I do want to write like a romance series. And I told you, I'm going to do it flying by the seat of my pants. I haven't gone there yet. I don't even know if I have any skill or talent in that area, but one day I really want to do that as opposed to, educational materials, which is what I really write. What do I read? Well, I read, honestly, between 2 and 5 books a week. And why do I read that much? Because as a publisher, I get plenty of manuscripts and queries. I'm also fortunate to host several shows, as Eileen mentioned, on cable television and streaming that I interview authors. If I'm going to be interviewing an author, I am going to read their book before the interview. So what do I read? I read the books that come across my desk. If I'm on vacation, what do I read? Garbage. Honestly, I turn off my brain and I read complete garbage because, you know, we all need a break sometimes. And yes, somebody asked if we are publishers. Yes, I own Red Penguin Books, which is a publishing company of all of these books and more. We work with authors who wrote a book and are ready to be published. We work with authors who want to write a book, and I coach and encourage them along the way and help them with book development. And we also work with authors who don't want to write a book. They want me to write a book, or they want, you know, we have staff who writes a book. When we ghost write books, and just so you know, fun statistic, they say that almost 60% of books are ghost written. That's a crazy statistic. You will never see my name at the bottom of a book that I've ghost written. Incidentally, I did not ghostwrite any of these books I showed you today. I will not take credit for them because that's not fair to the people that I'm writing for, but these are not among them. So we do publish for all of those people. We publish digital, print, and audio books. We do have voice actors and we do produce audio books here. So another question was, how many books do I work on, help authors with, and personally write in a year? A lot. Quite a lot. We generally publish, oh goodness, I would say between 2 and 7 or 8 books a month is what we're publishing here, depending on the time. And great question. During COVID, did I read or write more than usual? Well, certainly we have been super busy here, and I think it's not because of me, but because of you. People have been writing up a storm due to COVID, and I'm thrilled that people are writing up a storm. So we have been publishing more than usual because I think that while we're all kind of stuck inside, it's been a terrific thing for people to be able to write more. I don't know that I read any more than usual, but really, if I'm reading from 2 to 5 books a week, I don't think you want me reading more than usual because of COVID. That's a lot of books, but I love it. I always say that my favorite thing is people reading and people writing. Reading because, you know, we authors are nothing if there are not readers. So one of the things I just adore about the book fairies is that we have a similar mission in wanting people to read. I am so encouraging of people reading. And Stephen King, one of the greatest authors, said that if you want to be a better writer, read more. So I would really encourage any of you watching this to write, but read. I hope we have people who are running after this to either read a book or write a book. How about you? Are you
so interesting. I honestly, I really enjoyed the whole video. It was amazing. So you did a great job. I can tell you're really passionate about what you do. And I just think that everybody watching is going to run out and start thinking about, what can I write about?
Good.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that is watching all of the Celebrity Reader Spotlights. We have 2 full weeks, for the next weeks of more authors that are going to be taking place. And so, Stephanie, thank you so much for doing this for the book.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
It was
happy
amazing.
writing.
All right. Bye.
Bye.